So, okay. With that being said, I think I'll get started, and especially knowing that it is recorded, we'll just kind of go on the premise that people will probably be watching this as it's being recorded. So in the chat, I'm going to share with you right now a link to these slides. And when we come in, and we'll just give a few more seconds here, but as we're all waiting, if we could just add our contact details, you could either go to the QR code that's on this screen. Also, you can find that linked there if you're on the slides themselves. You'll also want a Post-it note and a pen or a piece of paper and a journal next to you. And then if you could just send in the chat a greeting from wherever you are in the world. So here in Barcelona, they speak Catalan, and so they would say bon dia from Barcelona because it's still in that window of time where they're still saying good day. I didn't know that word. Is that a good morning? Yeah, or no, good afternoon?
It means hello.
Hello. I'll be moving to Bangkok, actually, Naomi. Maybe I'll contact you. Okay, great. When you think of values, the word values, what comes up for you? But I mean, what really comes up for you? So when I say that, let's think about that in terms of emojis. So as a reminder, you can find access to more emojis if you look here in your reactions button, and then there's 3 dots, and that will give you access to more options for emojis. So when you hear values, school values, personal values, what are you really thinking? And if you could pop that emoji into the chat. Okay, so looks like we're going with the kind of a shocked look. We have indifference kind of on some of these. If I were to tell you that a lot of people roll their eyes whenever we start with values work in a school, that seems to be a very common reaction to the word values. So this is how Brene Brown defines a value. And I'll just give you a moment to read that to yourself. And then she also says this, and I'll read this quote to you. She says, one reason we roll our eyes when people start talking about values is that everyone talks a big values game, but very few people actually practice one. It can be infuriating, and it's not just individuals who fall short of the talk. In our experience, only about 10% of organizations have operationalized their values into teachable and observable behaviors that are used to train their employees and hold people accountable. 10%. If you're not going to take the time to translate values from ideals to behaviors, if you're not going to teach people the skills they need to show up in a way that's aligned with those values, and then create a culture in which you hold one another accountable for staying aligned with the values, it's better not to profess any values at all. They become a joke, a cat poster, total BS. So why do values matter? Well, they matter for these reasons here, and they do set expectations or standards for behaviors for the people within the ecosystem that we're living. So in a school environment, that's the parents, that's the students, that's the teachers, that's everybody involved, the operations team. So it's really setting expectations and creating a shared language. Whether we realize it or not, our values are influencing our decision-making process. And so actually one of the courses that I teach, and I didn't, because I know many of you, I didn't introduce myself properly, but so one of the courses that I teach in the summer is advanced school leadership. And we go through a bunch of different kinds of ways that we can make decisions as school leaders, or a lot of different decision-making protocols that we can use. And we don't want to deny the fact that values do play into that, for better or worse. Values play into the way we make personal decisions all the time. So why would that be any different when a school leader or a school leadership team sits down to make an important decision? So because all of this comes together and creates a culture, again, for better or worse, we really should be more intentional about how we do the work of values in our schools. Today, we'll have just some time to start exploring, to plant some ideas around values-driven leadership, to begin thinking about that relationship between values and decision-making. And then I'll leave you with some ideas of how we can move from words to action. And that's really the work that I do in my consulting work with schools. When I work with them on leadership, it could be working with a small team, and we're looking at what are our shared values, and then how do we operationalize those in our practices. It could be looking at the school values and then thinking about how do we develop curriculum that's aligned with our values. So really becoming actionable with these words. And today we'll inquire into these ideas for the next 20 minutes or so by identifying our own values and then having a shared dialogue. And then I'll leave you with some resources to take back to your teams and your schools. So let's begin. You'll need a piece of paper and something to write with. This process is adapted from Elena Aguilar and Brene Brown. So they both have guided my way of working with schools and teams and teachers when it comes to doing values. And I've tried it Elena's way and I've tried it Brene's way. And then I've sort of taken the two and recreated it into this newer version. So what we'll do is on the screen, I'm going to show you a list. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of values that you can choose from, or you may write your own. And you're going to jot down your top 8, meaning when you see these words, you're thinking, these are the things that are most important to me. Or you're thinking, these are the things that help me find my way when I'm lost. Or you're thinking, this fills me with a sense of purpose. So here we go. Here is our list. I know they're small, but you should be able to see them okay. And you'll just, again, jot down your 8. And we'll take another 5 seconds or so. Okay, so now that you have your 8, I'm going to ask that you cross off 4. So how will you make that decision? Megan's looking nervous about this. So you're thinking, do these really define me though? is this who I am at my best? And I really like this third one to help me cross off. So is this a filter that I use to make hard decisions? So maybe they're all really important to you, but do they define you? Do they tell the story of who you are when you're at your best? And do they help you to make decisions? So go ahead and narrow it down. And as you're doing that difficult task of narrowing it down, you may be finding that one can be nestled under another. So maybe you identified love and family and you're thinking, okay, maybe I can get rid of the family one because it's incorporated in love. And that might help you to get closer to your top ones. Now that you have your 4, we're going to try to get down to our 2 top values. So we'll cross off 2 more. And the way you can think about that is really, which of these do you feel when you're living fully into your values? And the experts around this work would say that there is no difference between your personal values and your professional values, that you can't really separate the two. Because oftentimes when we do this activity, somebody will say to me, well, are we talking about at work or at home? And it's really hard to separate the two, actually. So think of them together. And when you have your top 2, if you would feel comfortable, I would invite you to share it with everybody in the chat. Just go ahead and type your top 2 so we can get an idea. Beautiful. So you can imagine doing this with people, even in your own teams that you may have been working with for years and years and years, but how enlightening to find out how they've identified their top values. Now, if I were to be doing this with my team, I would give more time to it. You know, I wouldn't be rushing you through that selection process, but I wanted you to get a sense of the activity. But when you bring this back and do this with teams, another idea would be then to post them. So when I've done this with instructional coaches, because so much of the work that they do is tied to values-driven work, we post those values in our workspace together, and then it becomes a way that we reflect. So maybe at the end of a week, we'll ask each other in a meeting as a reflective question, you know, how did we live into those top 2 values this week here at school? Or how are we as a team in our processes communicating the school values? So we would post the school values if you have them as a school as well. And then you want to also be thinking about not only what does it feel like when you're living fully into these values, but if you can think of a time when your core values may have been tested by people at work. You know, how did that experience help you to understand your values better? And I can recall a time when I got into like a really heated situation with a colleague. And then I said, gosh, authenticity really matters to me, doesn't it? And for me, it was just so clear that that was a top value because it came out of a difficult situation. The other thing is when you start using coaching language with people, you can try to paraphrase them by extracting a value. So when you're listening to somebody, you can say, so integrity is important to you. Now, they may have not said the word integrity at all, but if you can tap into somebody's value, it helps them to I think, go deeper in their own reflections as well. So I find that I use values a lot when I'm paraphrasing, and it's hard to do. And sometimes you don't get it right, and that's actually okay. They might say, no, that's not one of my top values. That's not what I'm talking about here. And that's really good because it helps them to go even deeper when they then clarify. So with that being said, I know we're a small group here, but I'm still going to put us into just 2 separate breakout rooms so that you can have a more intimate conversation. And these are possible prompts. So they're prompts that will help take you in the direction of talking about values-driven leadership and also the role of decision-making when it comes to values. And then, of course, just that reminder there to be confidential, because there are questions here around like, would you be able to guess the core values of one of your leaders at your school, based on decisions that they make or their interactions or the way that they communicate? Would you be able to guess which 2 would be on their Post-it note today if they were to do this? And so rather than giving away names, we'll try to be confidential with some examples like that. But I'm just going to put us into just 2 rooms so you can have a little bit more of an intimate conversation. And then again, you have these slides, so hopefully these questions will be really accessible to you to help guide that brief conversation. And it won't be a long one because we are conscious of time, but it will give you a few minutes to dialogue. Okay. Welcome back. So hopefully that gave you a little taste of the kinds of things we can be thinking about when it comes to values and how they play out in a school. I wanted to leave you with some ideas for moving from words on a page or on a website or beautifully posted school values around a school to action. And so congratulations, because you already are one step ahead of many, because you are becoming self-aware of your own values. So really knowing yourself, knowing your own values and how these affect your decisions and your actions is really the first step. So what's interesting about that is we may think of some of our school leaders and they may profess, like Brené Brown says, they may profess the school values, but I really wonder if they've done the work themselves to see how aligned they are with the school that they're leading when it comes to their values and the values that the school carries. So knowing yourself, knowing your values, and maybe it means that we need to carve out time and support people with doing this kind of values-centered work in our organizations. You know, we carve out that time and we do this together. And so what that would look like is some team development. We can't assume that everybody's going to independently take on doing an activity where they identify their top 2 values and think about the ways that that affects their decisions and their actions, but we can, again, build in time in terms of our teams. So spend time getting to know the values of the people that you work with, and then make them public, post them around the room, put these next to your laptop when you're working so that that becomes a filter through which you start to look at your work as well. And then be intentional about how you bring attention to them regularly. So I hope that you don't just put these on a piece of Post-it note, today and then forget about them. Come back to them in a week and think about what examples do I have of how I've lived into those top 2 values over my last week. Unpack the school values together and celebrate examples. So one thing that I did on my senior leadership team, my most recent senior leadership team that I was part of, was the way we initiated every weekly meeting is we started by sharing examples of the school values in action. And so we might say, I was in a parent coffee this week and this parent said this, and it was really an example of our top value of kindness. Or we would say, this second grade student did this, and that was an example of our top value of respect. So really, again, carving out time and being intentional and celebrating when we see it happening. What's harder to do is hold each other accountable when we fall out of alignment with the values. And so one way of doing this, one strategy that I have found that works is if you keep these on your agenda, you keep your either school values, or if you're all of your team members' personal values could be interesting too. And then you use that as a way of kind of checking yourselves. So you say, okay, we're about to make a decision. Let's really make sure that in this decision, we are holding true to these school values. And then afterward, holding each other accountable could sound like, well, we've just made a decision, and I know that our school really values equity. I'm wondering how equitable our decision actually is. Can we look at it through that lens? And so that's a way of holding each other accountable to your values without, really having that difficult conversation. And then the hardest part is, of course, building this into our strategy, which is a lot of the work that I do with senior leadership teams. These are things that I'm only going to point out a few here, but like working with our HR teams. So the way that they communicate, how in line are their communications or their policies with the school values? Sometimes there's a clash there between a policy and a value. And that's when you start to lose trust. And that's when culture can be affected. That's when people call BS. So HR is a big place to look, as well as onboarding and recruiting. Are there ways to build these questions around values into our interview process to find out how aligned somebody is with our school values? Are there ways when we're onboarding people within their first week of school, within their first moments of being on campus, we should be showing them who we are, not just saying who we are when it comes to those words that are on the website that attracted them to our school. So engaging people in work around values is really critical. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with some places to go next. And so you'll have some really great activities you can go to here on Brené Brown's site. You can listen to the podcast that she's post it there on that. I like that article. These are just starting places because there's a lot you can do with this, but this is where I would start. And then if you want to get in touch with me, again, please add your contact information as well. But if you want to see, kind of follow along in some of the consulting work I'm doing with schools, please feel free to look on LinkedIn and Twitter. And then my website is linked there as well. And maybe I'll see you in a TCNJ class. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you being here with me.
Thanks, Kristine. It was great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.